It was a cold autumn night. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I couldn't resist starting the video that way just because this morning's kind of chilly. So I was going through my morning routine and everything, drinking my tea. I decided to put a blanket on and I'm like, drinking tea with the blanket. I'm like, I feel like an old lady. And that reminded me of, those old Christmas movies that begin with an old lady sitting by a fire wrapped in a blanket, sipping on some hot tea, and then she begins telling the story, and that's how the movie starts. It kind of reminded me of that, so I thought I'd just go with it. And to be fair, at times I do kind of feel like an old lady. Just, physically, I mean, lately, because of everything I've been going through, so it seemed appropriate. And in case you were wondering, yes, I did consider um, doing, the old lady British accent, but one, I kind of suck at accents, and two, there is no way I could sustain a British accent while also trying to sound like an old lady. So I'm like, yeah, let's just stick with my flu voice and go with that. So don't worry, this is not a Christmas story. In fact, it's more of a murder mystery, minus the murder, so I guess just a mystery. What is not a mystery, though, is what happened on Friday night. So, as you know, if you watched my last video, Friday night at around 11:30, one of my asshole neighbors decides to start blasting music. And anyway, I don't need to go into detail. That is not the point of this video. I already discussed that at length in my previous video. So if you haven't seen it, you can go back and watch. The reason why I'm making this follow-up video, if you will, is because, as I mentioned in the previous video, I was coughing and my nose was runny and I had trouble breathing and I had a headache and I was just like way too weak and there was no way I'd be able to get up and get dressed and go out and try to figure out which apartment it's coming from and either, knock and confront the person and try to explain the situation or call the cops and then have to deal with that and everything. So I'm just like, I just stayed in bed and waited for it to be over and, yeah. I did, however, tell my landlord, and he's like, if you know which apartment it came from, let me know and I'll send an official warning. And unfortunately, because of that, I did not know which apartment it came from. So I decided, you know what, let me go speak to the neighbors and then I'll be able to hopefully know where it came from and then be able to tell my landlord. So yesterday, after recording the video explaining this entire story, I went out and I spoke to my neighbors. Now, every time I've heard noises or, stuff like that, it always seemed to come from downstairs. So I always kind of assumed it was one of the apartments downstairs. Since the person directly underneath me once complained about noise coming from my apartment, I have no idea what he was talking about, but anyway, it seemed unlikely he would be the culprit since, people who complain about noise are not usually the type of people who go ahead and make the noise for which people complain. So I kind of assumed, okay, it's not that apartment, it's the one next to it. And the way the building is structured, there's 6 apartments, so 2 at the top, then 2 in the middle. I'm the one on the, left if you're facing outward like I am right now. And then, so the apartment I was talking about was underneath that one. So I kind of figured, all right, so I'm here. The guy underneath once complained about noise coming from our apartment, whatever that was. So it's probably not him, but it seems to be coming from downstairs, so it's probably from the apartment there. That's kind of what I figured. So I'm like, let's just start with my neighbor from right up here in the middle, and hopefully he can confirm that, and then I can tell the landlord, and he can send an official warning. So go ahead. Wait, I wait till it's like 11:30 just to make sure that, it is the weekend, so I don't want to wake anyone up. I don't want to basically do what the guy from the previous night did and, go knocking on someone's door way early in the morning. It'd pretty much be the equivalent. So I waited till it was about 11:30, I think. So go ahead, knock. Guy answers, and I kind of explain the situation. Hey, did you hear the music last night? Um, I spoke to the landlord in order to make an official, or for him to issue an official warning. I need to know exactly what apartment it came from. So, if you can help me try to figure that out, then I can let him know. And as we're talking, his roommate comes back, so I'm able to speak to both of them. However, they're like, "Oh, sorry, we were out yesterday, so we didn't hear anything. We weren't aware of anything." So I'm like, "All right, no worries. Thanks anyway. Have a good day." So since at that point, I still kind of figured, all right, it's probably coming from downstairs. Let me go to the apartment upstairs and kind of speak to those people to see what the situation is. Now I know that one of those two apartments, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a couple, I don't know, but I've definitely seen the mother with two young children, so I'm like, there's no way that it's her. No, or no parent with young children would ever do that because they know they have to deal with, well, waking their kids and then having to put them back to sleep and all that's involved with that. So I'm like, all right, there's no way it's her. Unfortunately, I don't really know which apartment she lives in. So let me just pick an apartment at random, knock, and see what happens. So turns out it's a black guy who answers the door. So definitely a different family. Um, which is funny because I say that I'm like, that sounds racist for some reason because her husband could be black, but anyway, I've seen the kids and they're definitely not mixed race, like they're definitely 100% white. So anyway, whatever. Got sidetracked. So the point is, it wasn't the apartment where she was in. So I'm like, all right, she's in the other apartment. I won't bother going there. There's no point. Let me speak to this guy. And I did hear before he answered the door, he was speaking to a child. So I'm like, oh, okay, he also has kids. So, odds are it's not him because once again, no parent with a young child would blast music at 11:30 at night because then they have to deal with putting the child back to sleep. So explain the situation once again. Hey, did you hear music last night around 11:30? And what surprised me, he's like, nope, I didn't hear anything. So I'm like, all right, it was really loud. There's no way you could have not heard it. So I'm like, all right, it's kind of suspicious, but it's not logical that he would be the one to have been blasting the music. Plus, whenever I heard music and stuff like that, it never seemed to be coming from upstairs, always seemed from downstairs. So I'm like, it's probably not him. Still a little weird that he wouldn't have heard anything. But I'm like, whatever, thank him, go downstairs. I'm like, all right. I went to the apartment next to mine. They weren't there, didn't hear anything. Got upstairs, didn't hear anything. Um, his neighbor, which I didn't speak to, was that woman with the two young children. I'm like, there's no way it's her. So let's not waste our time. So I went downstairs and I'm like, all right, there's a chance that I might end up speaking to the person who is responsible for it. I don't know how they're going to react. So let me start with the other neighbor, the neighbor that's right underneath me, the one who once complained about noise coming from my apartment, because odds are it's not him. So knock on his door, wait, there's no answer. So I'm like, all right, let me knock a second time to be safe. Knock, wait a bit, no answer. So I'm like, all right, he's probably not there. So screw it, let me just knock on the apartment of the guy who's probably responsible. So I knock, and of course, just as that person answers the door, the other neighbor, who turns out was there after all, opens the door at the exact same time. So I'm like, oh, okay, let me just speak to both of you at once, explain the situation. I already met the guy from the apartment underneath mine because there was issues with water leaking from somewhere at some point. So anyway, already met him before. And, I explained the situation. Hey, were you guys home last night? Did you hear music at around 11:30? And one of them, the guy right underneath me, is like, oh, I wasn't here last night. So, obviously I didn't hear anything. And the other guy is like, Oh, it was coming from the apartment upstairs. So basically the apartment right next to mine, which seemed weird. It's just, I don't know, the way he said it seemed like he might be lying. But the other guy, the guy right like underneath me, even though he wasn't there, he was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard music, like loud music coming from that apartment in the past. It was definitely them." So I'm like, "All right, there's two people saying it's the people upstairs." But if it was the person upstairs, then the guy above him definitely would have heard. So I'm like, okay, there's all these different people saying all these different things. Some of them are definitely lying. Either it's the two guys downstairs who are responsible. Maybe they're friends, they hang out, they were just hanging out on Friday, blasting music. I don't know which apartment it came from, but they're like, all right, you know what? Let's just lie, pretend it wasn't us, blame someone else. So that's one option. The other option is the guys in the apartment next to mine were lying, and they were there yesterday or on Friday, even though they said they weren't. Or potentially it's the guy upstairs with the young child who was blasting music and just pretended like he didn't hear anything, but that seems unlikely. That seems the most unlikely scenario. So I'm guessing it's either the guys right next to me or the guy in the apartment downstairs. Probably to the right, but it could be to the left. I don't know. So either way, people are lying. I don't understand why. It's not really a big deal. But yeah, so my neighbors, some of them, I don't know which ones, but some of them are definitely liars. And I just feel like I'm stuck in this weird, like, real life murder mystery minus the murder of, like, who is the culprit? Who blasted the music on Friday night? And, there's no way of knowing for sure, so I let the landlord know everything. And, sorry. And he's like, all right, I'll send a warning to the people in the apartment number 3, so the apartment right next to mine. And, we'll see what happens. And at this point, I'm kind of ambivalent. Part of me hopes, being visited by a neighbor and that's scaring them enough to lie for some reason, which still seems weird to me, will, have scared them enough that they won't do it again. And I won't have to deal with this ever again. That's, what part of me is hoping. Another part of me is hoping that they'll do it again just because, like, Friday was the worst day, like the cold, I was feeling like crap, it was horrible. I was struggling to fall asleep for 4 hours, and just when I was about to fall asleep, I started blasting music. And it's just like it ruined my entire night. So it's like part of me wishes they'll do it again so that one, I can go out and figure out exactly which apartment it's coming from. That way, one, I know who lied to me. And two, I can, even though I'm tempted to confront them and make them feel like pieces of shit by explaining my situation and being like, hey, I have stage 4 cancer. I could literally be dying. You blasting music is keeping me from resting. Not resting properly could literally kill me. So that is one option. And yeah, okay, it's kind of tempting to do that given the fact that they're complete assholes and they're liars. But I'm also slightly more tempted to, if ever it happens again, just call the cops so they have to deal with the cops and hopefully they're scared straight. So, anyway, I don't know what's gonna happen. As I mentioned, it's all just a big mystery of someone's lying. I don't know who. I don't know who is responsible. And yeah, it's just a lot of unknown and confusion. It's just kind of ironic how complex and convoluted this entire thing became when at the core of it, it's something very simple. Just some asshole neighbor who's inconsiderate blasting music late at night on Friday night. Why does it have to become so complicated of trying to figure out which apartment it is and then like someone says he didn't hear anything, other people say it's him, others say they weren't there, and so on and so forth. And I'm just like, okay, I did not realize that people would just lie about something so ridiculous as this. But anyway, makes a good story, you know? Plus, I get to feel like an old lady drinking tea sitting, well, I'm not sitting by a fire, but I can pretend like I'm sitting by a fire. So anyway, that was my story, my murder mystery story minus the murder. And don't worry, if ever I figure out which apartment it came from and who was lying, I will definitely make another video letting you know and giving you a complete update on that. So thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you at some point in the future.